Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
I found a kid who swings a golf club like a dream. I'd like to try to qualify him for the U.S. Amateurs.
Coming to Apple TV Plus.
What's your name?
I'm not into older guys, but I'm flattered.
A new comedy series, Stick.
I don't want to go on this trip.
Your mouth's saying one thing, but those eyes are saying something else.
From the home of Ted Lasso.
This is your shot at redemption? This is your mulligan?
Owen Wilson.
This game takes and it takes. The game's finally giving me something back.
Stick.
You know Arnold Palmer?
Iced tea, lemonade, mix it.
I'm missing a nap for this.
Streaming June 4th on Apple TV Plus.
Oh, come on, Gavin. How hard could Y2K have been to fix in England? Just send somebody up to push the clock hands back on Big Ben. Ass.
The following podcast contains
Mother trucker, that hurt like a butt cheek on a stick.
explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you almost ground society to a screeching halt over 2 digits, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 476, the final countdown edition of the show. It's part 1 of our winter series for 2025 Et Tu Y2K, when we talk about that time 25 years ago when we all thought the world was going to end because of a cost-saving measure. Stay tuned. What the Hell You Think podcast is brought to you by returning sponsor Arnold's Apocalypse Palace. When the end of the world is near, Arnold's has you covered. Are you in the market for meals ready to eat, water purifiers, and solar generators? Looking for high-quality medical supplies, shortwave radios, and long gun ammunition? Or do you need a whole end-of-the-world bunker special, everything you need to survive the end of days? Arnold's Apocalypse Palace is the only place to shop. From one-man quick shelters to an array of underground decommissioned missile silos, you can ride out the Armageddon in comfort and style. Act now and get a free desalinator with any purchase of over $50,000. Just use the promo code DOOM2025 at checkout.
You are wise to stay at home. In 1 minute, the ball will drop and you will see pandemonium. Listen to him. The ball is beginning to move. They can feel it. They know it. In 47 seconds, it will be 2,000. You're in Times Square with a couple of million intimate friends. 35 seconds. They're ready in 30. Get close to somebody you love. In 25 seconds, it'll be the new year. In 20 seconds. And we're going to count it down from here down when we get to 10. Are you ready? Happy New Year early. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy 2000!
I would love to tell you that I spent New Year's Eve 1999 at a raging party complete with
Drugs, booze, women.
Sadly, I passed that evening at home, alone. You see, I'd recently moved back to the East Coast from California, and my housemates at the time were at work, and I didn't really know anyone else, and besides,
No one likes you anyway.
and I was in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., Woodbridge, Virginia, to be specific, a place where government workers go to find semi-affordable housing, and fun goes to die by neglect. So I got some beers, and I got hammered.
She did.
I remember sitting in our basement game room / recording studio, watching the festivities in Times Square, and I remember thinking,
Thank you, God.
but I wasn't there. Because long before I lived in New York City, I knew the simple rule that all New Yorkers live by: never go to Times Square, and definitely never go there on New Year's Eve.
It is known. It is known.
Still, as the ball dropped and the clock ticked closer to midnight, I got a little depressed. I was home alone, and I had no one to kiss come midnight.
Yeah, right. Like that would happen.
And I turned to a song that seemed to capture my innermost feelings. I turned to
Kids with your loud music and your Dan Fogelberg.
And I remember standing and staring out my back door, more than a little drunk, listening to
Met my old lover in the grocery store. The snow was falling Christmas Eve.
And sadly wondering if next year would be better than the last. And knowing in my heart that it wouldn't. But hey, at least I wasn't sitting in a bunker underneath a church in rural Idaho with a rifle in one hand and the Bible in the other, or standing in the field with a couple of dozen whack jobs holding
crystals, sage,
and humming out of tune. I wasn't in a nuclear complex in North Dakota jittering over a radar scope in case the Russians' antiquated ICBM suddenly began launching of their own because their software had glitched. I didn't have to spend the evening on standby because I might have to rush out to a power plant in Kenosha to rewrite computer code that was supposed to have been done 6 months ago.
Oops, missed one.
And now the grid was failing because of a cascade conflict and the nation was plunging into darkness and chaos. I might have been feeling a little maudlin, but considering what people have been expecting for the year 2000 for the past couple of years, I thought all things considered, things were going pretty damn good. Which brings us to our topic for this week's show and for the winter series for 2025, the Year 2000 Bug, and what the freakout was all about. So sit back, slap on your goofy-ass New Year's 2000 glasses, crank up the number one song on New Year's Eve 1999, and get ready to head back 25 years to the Y2K panic. Before we can tell the tale of 1999, we need to go further back and explain why the problem existed in the first place.
Do we have to?
It's the only way we get from here to there. Programmable devices, or computers if you like, have existed a lot longer than people imagine. 9th century Persians had a mechanical flute player.
What?
He's a sex robot.
What?
No, like the musical instrument, not the skin flute. An Arab engineer named Al-Jazari had built a mechanical drum machine in the 12th century, and in 1801, the Jacquard loom could reproduce cloth patterns via pasteboard with holes punched in it. According to Wikipedia, quote, the first computer program is generally dated to 1843, when a mathematician named Ada Lovelace published an algorithm to calculate a sequence of Bernoulli numbers intended to be carried out on Charles Babbage's analytical engine, unquote. All of this, however, required resetting wires and switches to instruct the machine on what to calculate. This was the standard for many, many decades until the first modern computers came along in the 1940s and 50s. As the machines grew more complex and capable of more functions, a simpler method than a control panel with wires and switches was needed to give the computer instructions. You know, to program it.
I am programmed in multiple techniques. A broad variety of pleasuring.
See, that was a sex robot. And the method that became common was essentially the same as the Jacquard looms, cardboard with holes punched in it. A decade or so later, programs went from punch cards to large spool of magnetic tape, like a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and then to magnetic hard drives. But they all needed one thing to make them work, and that was a common language to tell the computer what it should do. Now, I'm going to be brutally honest here. I know next to nothing about computer programming languages.
This shouldn't come as a surprise.
So I'm taking the very basic level and just running with it. Programs are written in a machine language and the most elementary of machine languages is, of course, binary.
The binary seemed perfect for this.
However, binary is slow and clunky, and modern machines needed a better language to write programs with, and so the advent of a machine called a compiler was used.
Composting?
Yeah, sure, we'll just say that it made compost. I don't know what the fuck. All I know is that it said that the research said that it allowed high-level languages to be written, like Fortran, which sounds like a 60s sci-fi villain, and COBOL, which sounds like a 70s sci-fi religion.
And with the help of the Lords of COBOL.
Or the Mormons, whichever. And I read some words about these things, and I understood basically nothing about them, so let's just say that these were languages that early computers were told how to compute things.
It was very informative.
With all of this in place, the computer revolution could now proceed. By the late 1960s and early 70s, computer mainframes began to enter the commercial market, performing an array of tasks. Basically anything that required crunching large numbers had a computer doing it. Banking, telephonics, payroll, billing, airline ticketing, targeting, nuclear warhead, logistics, you know, the money stuff. As the technology evolved, smaller systems were designed that could be dispersed off the central computing hub to handle smaller but still complex tasks, like handling machines in manufacturing plants, maintaining nuclear reactors, managing the flow of electrical power through the grid, tracking down inventory in a warehouse. And the first computer revolution was entirely commercial and largely out of the public view. But by the late 1980s, computers were utterly vital to the national economy and the industries. There was almost nothing that did not in some way rely upon computer automation to function.
Now that's a bit of a problem.
You see, COBOL and Fortran, which are acronyms, by the way, and I would tell you what they stand for, but if you care about things like that, you already know what they mean, and if you don't know what they mean, then you really don't give a shit.
Definitely the latter.
They were written in the mid-1950s, and at the time, every single byte of space, every 0 and 1 on the storage medium was literally worth $5 or $10. So the fewer bytes you used for your program meant that it was cheaper to operate.
Logical decision, logically arrived at.
So COBOL and Fortran coders used every trick they could think of to save space in their programs, including shortcuts like using only the last 2 digits of the year for the date. Thus, a COBOL program written and saved the year that I was born, 1969.
Nice.
Omitted the 1 and the 9 because everyone knew they meant 1969, thus saving 2 bytes of space that we used somewhere else. Also, when these program languages were written, it was literally unthinkable that they would still be used nearly 50 years later. And as far back as the late 70s, a few people were beginning to notice a potential problem. Quoting now from a Popular Mechanics article that was an oral history of the Y2K, quote, Peter D. Yeager, Canadian computer programmer. I realized what would happen in 1978. I was a computer operator for IBM. We managed a system called COLT, which stood for Canadian Online Tellers. One day I noticed that when we were typing in just 2 digits for the year, when we got to the year 2000, what numbers would I be typing in? Double zeros. And then wouldn't the computer think that it was 1900? I meant that any calculation based upon time, which is all financial calculations, would be incorrect. So I went to my boss and I said, we've got a problem. The computers out there aren't going to work properly when they hit the year 2000. And he looked at me and said, you're worried about a problem that isn't going to happen for 22 years? Relax, somebody will fix it by then. So I got up and left his office, unquote. This was the real seed of the Y2K problem. The people using the machines daily knew the code and they knew its limitations. There wasn't a conspiracy to conceal the issue or anything like that. It was just business as usual. More from Popular Mechanics. Quote, Casper Jones, a former manager and software researcher at IBM, said, I worked in the IT business since the early 1970s. We knew about the Y2K problem at IBM pretty early on, but I didn't pay that much attention to it until the 90s because it wasn't unique. There were other date-related issues in the software, unquote. So the programmers who knew about these issues went to those people whose ostensible job was to deal with problems. Their managers. The nerd would go into the manager's office and say something like, we've got a problem. And the manager would sigh and take off his glasses and rub the bridge of his nose because the nerds were always coming to him with their problems. And he would ask, what is it this time? And the nerd would say that in 2000 the computers wouldn't work. And the manager would look at the nerd. Then he would look at the calendar. Then back at the nerd. Then look at the calendar. And then finally back at the nerd and say,
Nerd alert. Nerd alert.
Because this wasn't his problem. If it was a problem, it was clearly
someone else's problem.
Because it was 25 years in the future. So could the nerd kindly go back to their desk and
go do your nerd stuff
and not come to him with those sort of things because it's just not a problem for him. And even if they were the kind of a manager that was going to do something, they were probably those really fucking annoying kind of managers that said, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions, you know.
Like an asshole would.
And when they heard the solution was to go into every single line of code on the computer systems and rewrite it to accept a 4-digit date, what they really heard was,
sounds expensive.
And again told the nerd to go back to their nerd stuff and leave the managing to them. And so time passed and nothing was done. But problems did begin to crop up. Quoting from an article in The Guardian, quote, in 1987, Marks & Spencer received a batch of tinned meat that was rejected because the company's computers thought it was almost 90 years past its January 2000 use-by date. 5 years later, a Minnesota kindergarten invited one Mary Bandar to join his class. She was 104 at the time, unquote. And more from Popular Mechanics, quote, we get to 1989 and still nobody's working on this problem. I am at a company that uses an IBM product called PROS, Professional Office Systems, and on January 1st, 1990, the system just goes haywire. Why? They're using a 1-digit year in their system. And so when it went from 1989 to 90, it went back to 0 again and messed everything up. Out of curiosity, I went to my personal computer and set the date to December 31st, 1999. With just a few minutes before midnight, I powered off the computer, waited 10 minutes, then I fired the computer and looked at the time. The date said it was 1984. That's when I began to get nervous, unquote. Because you see, by the 1990s, the second wave of the computer revolution had taken hold. Not only were mainframes powering businesses, but network desktop systems were getting integrated into offices from the Pentagon all the way down to your local dentist. I joined the Air Force in 1987, and by the time I reached my first duty station in 1988, electric typewriters were still the primary means of written communication. By 1990, I was working on a Zenith Z100 running DOS and typing out my paperwork in WordStar 7.0.
See there, Grandpa?
By 1993, computers were on every desk in the office, and even my parents had a Tandy one in their home.
Radio Shack puts the power of business computing in your home and saves you $300. The powerful 286 Tandy 1000, now only $11.99, including color monitor. You save $300. It's PC compatible, easy to use, comes with 7 ready-to-run programs for the family. To keep a budget, write term papers, or even do filing and create graphics. Complete Tandy 1000 system with color monitor, only $11.99. Only at Radio Shack.
For more about the glory of Tandy computers, see episode number 375.
That's a plug.
Businesses spent money and time training people to use these systems, but in the mid-1990s, they were utterly dependent on them to function. The old analog system for handling the massive amount of data generated by modern corporations was gone. And to be sure, they were still printing out every memo and maintaining a massive paper archive, but the nuts and bolts, again, the money stuff, that was all computers. Our entire economic infrastructure, and indeed a fair bit of our physical infrastructure, needed computers to function. And those computers contained a ticking time bomb set to go off at the stroke of midnight, January 1st, 2000. More from Popular Mechanics and Peter D. Yeager. Quote, in 1993, I wrote an article about the Y2K problem for Computer World magazine, which was the largest IT magazine in the world. They gave it the title Doomsday 2000. And it was the article that got everyone's attention, in which we said our information systems are based on a faulty standard that will cost the worldwide computer community billions of dollars. We and our computers were supposed to make life easier. What we have done is delivered catastrophe. And from that point until 2000, Y2K was the only thing I did. It became my full-time job. In the beginning, I was laughed at. I was called a farce and a jokester. But when they realized I was right, that the danger was real, I became the fearmonger. Most people did not seem to understand the depth of the programming we depend on. It's not unusual for a bank to have in excess of 50,000 programs. So when you say, we have a 2-digit problem, why don't you just expand it to 4 digits? Okay, fine. Go ahead. Where are they? Where are the dates? In which databases? And by the way, which ones are you going to fix first? If you change the program to use 4-digit years, that means you have to change all the input to 4-digit years. Now, the inputs to one program are the outputs to another program. To fix this one, you have to fix that one, and to fix that one, you have to fix the other one, and to fix the other one, you have to fix the vendor, unquote. And this needed to be done on millions of systems around the world, and it needed to be done fast. Naturally, it would take another 5 years from Diego's 1993 first warning for people to start doing anything, because, you know,
got a lot going on right now.
It was a complex problem, because it required the private sector and governments of every nation that had computers, to coordinate with one another and to implement a plan to fix the issue in under 2 years. A report on the issue from the Commerce Department in 1995 pegged the total in private and government money thusly, quote, to find and fix their Y2K problems, businesses and government agencies have diverted in the neighborhood of $100 billion from other purposes in recent years. This substantial commitment reflects millions of business judgments in which firms recognize failing to protect either their critical systems would, in our highly competitive and transparent market economy, expose them to significant cost. The available evidence suggests that the sectors that have invested most and are now best prepared are those that provide the critical goods and services on which the rest of the economy depends: energy, finance, telecommunications, and transportation, unquote. More from Popular Mechanics. Tom Atlee, a co-founder and research director of the Co-Intelligence Institute and co-editor of The Awakening, The Upside of Y2K, said, quote, In March of 1998, a Silicon Valley tech manager who was on the board of my small nonprofit asked me, Tom, what do you know about the systemic effects of Y2K? And I responded, I don't have to worry, I have a Mac. Yeah, Apple didn't have a Y2K problem. And all the Apple Macintosh users were so quick to tell us PC users, well, our computers will be fine. But I would point out that nobody was fucking using Macintoshes, and that's why Steve Jobs was currently, I don't know, playing some software designer graphic thing until they had to bring him back to design the fucking iPod. Sorry, I still have some bitterness back from those days. And she said, yeah, I'm not talking about your computer. I'm talking about what will happen in all the interconnected economic, infrastructural, and managerial systems if the Y2K bugs go through some of its suspected breakdowns. And I did some research, and what I found suggested to me that the disruptions, either caused by the bug itself or by mass expectation of disruptions, were highly likely, unquote. The nightmare scenario goes something like this, and this is from a 1999 article in Vanity Fair. Quote, it's an instant past midnight, January 1st, 2000. And suddenly, nothing works. Not ATMs, which have stopped dispensing cash, not credit cards, which are being rejected, not VCRs, which are now really impossible to program. The power in some cities isn't working either, and that means no heat, no lights, no coffee in the morning, not to mention no television, stereos, phones, which, even in places without power, aren't working either. Bank vaults and prison gates have swung open, so have the valves on sewer lines. The 911 service isn't functioning, but fire trucks are on the prowl, though the blaze had better be no higher than the second floor since their ladders won't lift. People in elevators are trapped, and those with electronic hotel or office keys can't get anywhere either. Hospitals are shut down because their ventilators and x-ray machines don't work. And in any case, it's now impossible to build the HMOs. On the brighter side, no one can punch a time clock. On the darker, most of those big manufacturing plants have shut down because their lathes and robots aren't working. Pharmacies aren't filling prescriptions, the DMV is not processing license renewals, and everyone's dashboard keeps flashing service engine now. Mortgage payments sent on time have been marked late, and everyone's phone bill is messed up because all of those calls that began in 1999 ended in 1900. And on the internet, where thousands of websites are suggesting how to find God and when to move to the wilderness, the acronym for what's occurring is Et the end of the world as we know it, unquote. The size and scope of this problem was likened by some, okay, by me, in this podcast for the first time, to a movie that came out in 1998 where a group of roughneck oil drillers were called upon to save humanity from a planet-killing asteroid, featuring Bruce Willis and an adorable young Ben Affleck, who used an animal cracker to get into Liv Tyler's panties.
Don't wanna close my eyes. I don't wanna fall asleep 'cause I miss you, baby, and I don't wanna miss a thing.
Oh, did I try to use an animal cracker to get into my girlfriend's panties after seeing that movie?
You never really had a girlfriend.
Okay, fine. Technically, it was a middle-aged drunk chick I picked up at the karaoke bar, but, you know, it worked.
I didn't need to know that.
And only in this case, it wasn't Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck, Steve Buscemi, and Billy Bob Thornton that would save humanity. Humanity would be saved by
a bunch of goddamn nerds
who, quite frankly, coated their nerdy fingers to the bone. This may be why Y2K is remembered as a kind of joke today. A big deal made out of nothing but still, it wasn't. It's the exact opposite of what was happening. It was a big deal, and it could have crippled the world for months, if not years. And the enormous effect that went into fixing it wasn't done. It was an exceedingly rare moment in human history where people did not wait until everything was fucked and then try to unfuck it. I mean, yeah, they did wait for 20 years after the first warnings cropped up to do it, but hey, at least they didn't wait till after it was done. The nerds who fixed this problem are actually...
Well, look at this! Here's the guy who's just in the nick of time! What does that make us?
Big damn heroes, sir!
Ain't we just?
And instead, they're a punchline for Jay fucking Leno. You know, I'm glad he fell down that hill. I hope he falls down again. Fucking hate Jay Leno. From Time magazine, quote, the innumerable programmers who devoted months and years to implementing fixes received scant recognition. One programmer recalls the reward for a 5-year project at his company, lunch and a pen.
Thanks, I guess.
It was tedious, unglamorous effort, hardly the stuff of heroic narratives. nor conducive to an outpouring of public gratitude, even though some of the fixes that were put in place in 1999 are still used today to keep the world's computer systems running smoothly, unquote. And I pondered stretching this out to explain how the problem was fixed, but I don't know how they did it.
Think of it as a kind of magic.
Which, for all I know about computer programming, it might be magic. And also, it's 25 years later. It just isn't much drama to be wrung out of the moment of the fix because,
It didn't happen.
Yeah, and for once the government and businesses did what needed to be done on a problem before it became unfixable, unlike, say, climate change or the end of democracy. So let's just say that everyone lived happily ever after for a year and 9 months, and then the long dark shit spiral that led us to where we are today occurred, and there's no number of nerds that we could throw at it that could fix that. Besides, seriously, we all know the real story. The fun story of Y2K is not what happened. It's in the freakout that preceded what happened. And that, my friends, is where we will pick up for part 2 of Et Tu Y2K.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
That is it for the show this week. Oh, it is 2025, and we are on our bullshit for another year here at the Podcast Hut. We're telling this story all through the rest of January. And Pod Friends, we got a lot of stuff coming this year. It's our 10th anniversary.
Why are you still doing this?
Honestly, I don't know. It isn't for money or fame.
No, none of those things.
So I guess I'm doing it for you. You're welcome, I guess. In return, maybe you could kick us a buck at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. All that money is going to get Gavin some arch supports because he's got plantar fasciitis. Rate and review us so folks can hear us and find us and get an update on Gavin's feed. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits. Otherwise, he's going to switch the feed from an RSS to a Fortran-based podcast distribution system, and none of us knows how that's going to work. And so for me, Dave, we're leaving together. But still, it's farewell, Bledsoe, producer.
And maybe we'll come back to Earth. Who wrote these lyrics? Are terrible.
Gavin and all the fictional COBOL programmers on the show, we want to say, will things ever be the same again? No, of course not. They're never the same. I mean, that's how time works. And we'll see you all next week.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Twitter at @thehell_podcast, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
We raided the bunker directly after Y2K.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.